Hello, my name is Christine Colvis, and I'm the Director of Drug Development Partnership Programs at the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, most commonly referred to as NCATS. NCATS is one of the 27 institutes and centers at the National Institutes of Health. I wanted to make this recording about the Biomedical Data Translator, which we often refer to just as Translator, to help those of you who may be interested in submitting a proposal for our user interface to understand a little bit more about the context for the interface. But before I introduce the translator program, I want to first tell you about the mission of NCATS. And first, the mission of the NIH. So the mission of the NIH is to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems, and then apply that knowledge to enhance health. What the NIH does very well is basic research. And our research community produces a lot of publications and a lot of that fundamental knowledge that I mentioned. And we also conduct clinical trials with the goal of ultimately providing medications that will improve health. But one of the challenges that NCATS is trying to address is that all too frequently, the translation of basic science discoveries fails, and that fundamental knowledge being translated into clinical impact doesn't occur. And we're not doing a great job of using information from clinical settings to inform the basic research either. So NCATS's mission is to develop methods and strategies and processes that will improve our ability to make the translation of discoveries and knowledge into products that are going to impact human health. Now with Translator, we're specifically trying to address the fact that it's just not possible to keep up with all of the data that are currently available. PubMed alone has more than 30 million citations at this point, and that is not the only source of biomedical knowledge. There are many other databases that house very valuable information. We're sort of faced with the embarrassment of riches. The source of our wealth is, data and knowledge. There's so much information that the human brain can't make all of the connections among the different discoveries that have been reported because there's simply too much information for us as humans to even find, let alone know. The knowledge spans everything from chemical and biomolecular pathways through clinical and environmental exposure data and knowledge. And the goal of the Translator program is to create a tool that actually makes the connections and then brings those connections in the form of knowledge graphs to a user, which in our case would be a translational researcher. And we want to bring that to them so they can actually reason over that information and come up with new hypotheses. So to do this, we'll take advantage of things that are things that humans are really good at, and things that machines or computers are very good at. So computers are good at mining data very rapidly, much faster than a human possibly could. They can store far more information than a human brain would be able to store, and they can also rank and sort information pretty well if a human actually provides the instructions on how to do the ranking and sorting. Now, what humans are very good at are things like intuitive reasoning and visual reasoning. We can also accurately process natural language, which is a bit more challenging for a computer. Now, a couple of things that both computers and humans are good at would be filtering through the information. And we can also program the computer to follow logical reasoning. And so if we can develop computational tools that covers the characteristics that computers are very good at and present information to humans in a way that makes it easy for them to actually intuit the information that's available and reason over that information, we really will end up with a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. To do this, we need an intuitive interface that takes cognitive load into account and maximizes the user's working memory. The question for you, how do we present this rich data set to the researcher in such a way that they can actually synthesize the information with their own knowledge and reason over it? To our knowledge, this has not been done before. This is not going to be like presenting a list of things from a Google search or a list of publications from PubMed. What Translator is doing is connecting pieces of information from dozens of sources in the form of a knowledge graph. Correction, into knowledge graphs, because when a user inputs their query, there will not be just a single graph returned to them. There will be multiple graphs returned. How do we present these graphs in a way that it is most useful to the user, who, remember, is a translational researcher? In general, we envision Translator providing information to the user to help explain an observation or predict an outcome based on knowledge that already exists from dozens of data and knowledge sources. For example, how might drug X cause side effect Y? Or if a gene is knocked out, can we predict, using data and existing knowledge, what the outcome of knocking out that gene might be? So what we've been working on in the program for the last 4 years or so is to develop the computational tools to be able to make these connections across the data and provide researchers rich knowledge graphs that they can then use to inform their next steps. And now we're ready to develop an interface that will actually present this information to the translational researchers. We're not trying to build a decision support tool. We're not looking for something that community health providers can use. We're not looking for something that will be used by the general public. We're looking for something that can be used by researchers who have a focus toward developing therapies and treatments for patients. A few years back, we had recruited an organization called 18F, which is a part of the General Services Administration of the US government, and we asked them to do some initial user research for us. And their research included trying to gain a better understanding of things like what translational researchers are trying to accomplish in their work and what their goals are. What kind of information and data do they seek, and how do they describe it? What do they do with the information once they have it? How does it inform their research? 18F's interviews were conducted with postdocs, principal investigators, assistant professors, and even pharmaceutical industry research managers. And in general, what they learned, and those of you who are around scientists a lot know, is that scientists form and reform research questions and hypotheses. And each time they gather and analyze data, whether it's from experiments or literature or databases, they use this information to help shape their investigation and their thinking about the problem. And so one of the things 18F did was to diagram out the research process to help understand where the translator might fit in into that process and how it can best support the work that the scientists are doing. So you'll see this as you go through the slides that we've provided. There's a series of pastel colored boxes that describe how this process works. And each time you see a lavender or a yellow box, this is where we think the researchers could turn to Translator. The interface must allow the user to iteratively increase the relevance of the knowledge returned for their questions. Ultimately, we expect the information Translator provides to be critically evaluated by our users. We expect they will want to go to the source of the various points of knowledge in the graph. So another aspect of the interface is that we want a way to solicit and capture feedback on both systematic and specific complications that are encountered so that we can continuously improve the system. I thank you for your interest.